Forest of the Impaled, Dracula's Final Stand. Yes, this is a game about the historical Dracula and his battles against Muslim forces, Muslim invaders. This is a game for ideally at least two players, one player controlling Dracula's forces and the other player the Muslim forces. You can play the game solitaire, controlling both sides at the best of your possibilities, Christians versus Muslims, and that's how I played it. You can also play it as an asymmetrical team game in which one player still controls Dracula and the Christian forces, and then you can split the other commanders among multiple players. I don't know that it would work that way because then, well, you just have, one short turn and maybe your commander is in a position where they just do one little action, then you have to wait a lot for the game to come back to you. But again, I played that I was Dracula, I was all Muslim commanders, and it was just fine. I was also Dracula's brother, interesting guy. In the standard game, this guy is on the side of the Muslim. Historically, Dracula's brother betrayed him and so was fighting against him. You can also play a variant in which the brother is on the side of the Christians. Again, this is a game in the pub battles system or a pub battles line, so these games all come in plastic tubes such as this one. They have really nice looking maps that have a strong historical feel, and this one is no exception. Also, they're played using wooden pieces, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. So, the Muslim forces are invading Wallachia and Transylvania. They're coming from this area, and they will move toward that area of the map. Dracula's forces start set up pretty much anywhere you want them here, but there is a catch, which is Dracula is only one general, and you really cannot do much with forces without a general other than getting hit and retreating once you get hit, or sitting in a castle and hope that it takes a little too long for the opponent to slaughter you. So the game board is divided into areas, as you can see, which is a difference from other pub battles games that I played in the past. They were all played as miniature games in which you would measure distances with a ruler. We have castles, which are these areas here, these buildings that have a number of crosses in them. The number of crosses represents the number of troops that you can place in there. So that one, for example, takes 3 troops, and that would be a legal placement. As you can imagine, there will be enemy forces around there, moving, attacking, and stuff like that. Some areas are mountain areas, and only areas that are entirely or mainly mountainous count as mountain. This is important because only the Christian player, so Dracula and possibly Dracula's brother, can move into or through mountains, which means for the Muslim forces there are these bottlenecks here to negotiate, and again the Christian defenders will probably try to take advantage of that, unless the Muslim player really tries to take the long scenic route and go that way. In order to win the game, the Muslim player must control every castle on the map, and there's quite some traveling to do because there's one all the way up there, and so you gotta scatter your forces, and it's gonna be tricky. Also, as you take attrition, it's gonna be hard for the Muslim player to get reinforcements because you can recruit reinforcements only in areas of your homeland. So for the Muslim players, only this area. Once you are fighting up there, you just don't have the luxury. As opposed to Dracula is outnumbered, overwhelmed, but can run around and recruit new troops in any castle and also in any village, which they just look like castles but don't have a number of crosses there. So to win the game, the Muslim player must control every castle on the board. In order to win the game, the Christian player must control at least a castle in Wallachia and at least a castle in Transylvania by the end of the game. So it's entirely possible that both sides fail to complete their mission, in which case the game is a draw. So we have our lovely game pieces represented by these wooden pieces which lay flat, and they give the flat on the board, and they give the map this like nice look, like it's a military map. I'm just gonna put some random units here and there, just to give you a sense of how it may work. So these are the troops. The very same game pieces, this is elegance in design, may actually be placed standing on the board, and they represent areas of the forest that Dracula has decorated with impaled dead bodies. Sometimes enemy corpses, and sometimes bodies of his own citizens, which he is slaughtering, and again setting up there for morale purposes, of course, to lower the morale of the opponent. We have cubes representing the different commanders of the forces in play. And like in other games in the pub battle system, a cube can be sitting there with the symbol facing up, or it can be used to try to alter turn order. Each commander can try to alter turn order once per turn, and once they try to do so, then you flip it this way. All it does is that, again, to indicate that that commander cannot try to alter turn order anymore. Other than that, the commander functions just as normal. And turn order is super important, of course. This is a chit pull game, meaning that there will be a container, not included with the game, in which you will place the chits representing the commanders. Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. You draw a chit randomly, and that indicates which commander will activate next. And so, for example, we just learned that that commander right there will now activate, and will get to move and do things. However, it is possible to try to change the order of activation. That's precisely when your chit of a commander was drawn and you don't want to activate the commander yet, or a chit of a commander you want to activate has not been activated, so you want to jump ahead, you want to delay. Any way in which you want to change the order, you're going to roll a die, and you're going to try to roll equal to or lower than the rating of the commander. The rating of the commanders is 2 for the standard Muslim commanders, 3 for Dracula's brother, and 4 for Dracula himself. So he's by far the most aware, the most in the zone commanders on the board. And he needs that because pretty much almost everything else is against him. These ginormous armies that just keep coming. They can be really threatening. So we draw a chit from the cup. Possibly we resolve die rolls to see if the order is altered, but ultimately somebody will activate. The commander that activates gets to move, and as they move, they can pick up units, drop off units, even units that were moved earlier by another commander, and of course only an option for the Muslim commander, or for the Christian player if Dracula's brother is on the Christian side. So the commander that activates gets to move, and in moving they can also again bring troops with them. The commander can move up to 3 areas, the troops only up to 2. But again, I could say move here 1, 2, and then I pick up some of these troops, and I decide to start a mess there. No, I cannot do that because I just moved some troops by 3. So I would move there, drop all those troops, and move some other troops. Again, the commander can move, pick up troops, drop off troops, up to 3 movement factors for the commander and 2 for the troops. Each area costs 1 movement point to move into. Dracula also can drop off impaled units taken from the death pile, and up to 3 per movement. Another thing you can do by spending a movement point if you're in an area with a castle and or with a village is to recruit new units. Again, a village or a castle of your own homeland, in which case you roll a die, and this is a really random element, possibly the one random element I'm a little bit skeptical about, because big swing if you spend a movement point for 1 troop or for 6 troops. But again, that's what the rules say. As you move, you may also end up, again, in area that contain enemy units. Now, we don't have GPS here. People get lost easily, I guess. Maybe also the condition of the roads and road signs wasn't so good. So a big concept in the game is the fact that units may be lost at the beginning of battle. You organize your units into groups that can be between 2 and 4 each. And suppose that here Dracula decides to organize his troops into 3 groups, so 3, 3, and 2. And the Muslim player was traveling with 2 big groups here, 4 and 3. When the battle starts, so when the first round of the battle, the first thing that you do is you check to see which of these units are lost and which units are actually going to join in the battle. For each group, you roll a die and you're trying to roll equal to or lower than the rating of the commander. And so suppose that, for example, this is the roll for the Dracula player, and so that one is above the rating of 4, so these don't join yet, and these units do join. And you place the commander physically on top there to indicate that. And we're gonna say that the other player roll like this, so 1 is equal to or lower than 2, and suppose that that was the 1, and the other one is not there yet. So this is the battle as it looks like in the first round. Before I go there, maybe you wonder, what is the purpose of this? We're talking about groups. What is the purpose of the Impaled? They slow down the opponent when a Muslim player is trying to enter an area with Impaled units. They need to roll a morale check, and if they fail that, then they cannot enter that area. If they do make it, each group that passes the morale check enters the area and removes an Impaled unit, otherwise they have to retreat. But back, so I create enough suspense here around the combat system. So we determine who is gonna be there. Then units that joined, so here we have 4 for the Muslim player and 6 for the Dracula player. They fire at each other, they attack each other simultaneously. And it's very simple. Each die that rolls a 4, 5, or 6 is a hit and removes a unit of the opponent. In this case, 4 will fire at the same time as 4 of those Dracula units. The remaining one may choose to fire at units that are lost, in which case those units, after they get fired at, if they survive, they can fire back. So combat between units that join the battle is simultaneous. From units in the battle against lost units is not simultaneous. And that's just the way it is. Some units will be removed, and then players will have a chance to retreat or to stay. And if they both stay, or they both not been destroyed, then you roll again to see which of the lost units join, and you continue the procedure until a side is completely destroyed or a side has retreated. As for castles, so important, there are 2 ways of taking a castle. One is by storming it, in which case you can send only one, like a fight to 1 group of 1 versus 1 group of 1. And you send in your poor storming troops, one of them will fight against one of the opponent, but the defender fires first. And so, for example, we just rolled this, and so that unit is destroyed, and then I decide to continue storming, and I send another one there, and this is what they roll, it's eliminated, another one goes, finally the defender misses, and only if the defender misses, the attacker has a chance of rolling for an attack. And that's how you storm. You continue sending people until either you take the castle or you decide you have had enough of that. If you decide you have had enough of that, then you can choose, or instead of storming also, after storming or instead of storming, you can choose to besiege the place. In order to besiege the place, you need to have at least 1 piece more than there are inside the castle, and you just sit there, as simple as that. At the end of the turn, you roll a die, and you will take control of the castle if you roll equal to or lower than the number of turns that you spend besieging the place. So if I just started, I need to roll a 1 at the end of this turn. If I'm still sitting there at the end of next turn, then I need to roll a 2 or less, and so on and so forth. The game only has 4 turns, so as you can see, you may just not be able to get a castle within the confines of the game. So these are the general things. This is a general idea. As the Muslim player, you will push against scant forces. You get the sense that you totally destroyed everybody by the end of turn 2. Very, very common. Like, there's almost no one left. But then Dracula will be reforming and recruiting and maybe preparing a counterattack. And as a Muslim player, you still have a way to go. So it's a game that looked pretty desperate for the Dracula/Christian player early in the game, but different things may happen later in the game. Forest of the Impaled. Now, I played other games in the pub battle system. They all come in these tubes, and I'm not super crazy about it because then you have to lay the map flat. I just like boxes and I can stack them more easily. But I guess in this case, the box becomes a symbolic representation of such an important element in the game. People that get impaled so that the invaders feel a little bit freaked out by it. The theme is pretty unique. I never played a game with this theme. So a war game, which is, Dracula the prequel, before he became a vampire, when he was just a brutal impaler. It's a very interesting topic, of course, just because of the background of the story and then the fiction based on it. The game itself, as for its own merits, it's an interesting, completely asymmetrical game because the two sides, the Christian side and the Muslim side, play completely differently from one another. On one hand, you have the horde of generic, weak, inefficient pieces. But there's so many of them. They don't need to be that efficient. They don't need to roll so well. They just need to roll a lot of dice, which they will do. And they all come in. And poor Dracula, with his scattered Christian forces, doesn't really get to do much early on. We'll have to suffer a lot of defeats because there's only one general, and without that general, the forces they don't do much. What you can do, of course, is you're gonna place some defenders on those bottlenecks, on those passes there, and they're gonna get smashed and they're gonna retreat. That's all that they can do. They can defend in battle and retreat when they don't have a commander. And then when the time comes, you'll recruit somebody and you'll move somebody and you'll start, decorating the forest. And so by the end of turn 2, the things may look pretty desperate. Actually, by the end of turn 1, things tend to look pretty desperate for the Dracula or Christian player. By the end of turn 2 also. By the end of turn 3, something strange happens here. Because you still see a massive inequality on the board, but yet the Muslim pieces may still be not as close as they could be, and there's fewer of them. And the Dracula player, the Christian player, is recruiting, so doing more things. Now there are more pieces. The inequality, while remaining the entire game, is not as massive. So it really is a matter of one player pushing as fast and brutally as possible, and the other player delaying, buying time, trading space for blood, and so you have a very asymmetrical situation. Without the randomness, because you roll dice a lot of times, but then actually it gets to the point where you roll dice enough times that things kind of even themselves out. You start and having at the end that the curve that you expect when you do have enough randomness, that somehow randomness becomes its own corrective. Now, so it's a fun, interesting situation, a tense puzzle. One thing though, you have replay value. As you switch the two sides, it plays completely differently. And again, the advantage is you experience both sides if you play the game solitaire as I did. However, overall, you really need this replay that comes from asymmetry, because other than that, the game has a fairly limited replay value when it comes to the overall script, the overall narrative. Because, the objectives are always the same. The Muslim player has to take control of a certain number of locations. The Christian player has to prevent that from happening. But it's a very frontal, very linear situation. The Muslim player is always coming from the same side. There are only, I can go in this pass or in that pass. I can send my generic pieces here or my generic pieces in that pass, and your generic pieces without a commander will be here or there. But overall, the battles feel very similar to one another. Every Muslim player has the same rating. Every Muslim commander has the same rating, with the exception of Dracula's brother. But still, units that are all the same, commanders that are almost all the same, only 3-4 places where you can go, and I can push here or push there, but ultimately, if you switch them, nothing would really change. So you're going to have the overall script that will tend to present itself very similar from game to game. Also, the script being, again, things getting more and more desperate for the Dracula player, having a little bit of a tipping point around turn 3, and turn 4, the Dracula player will mainly want to try to, most likely the Dracula player will have lost all of their castles in Wallachia, and they need at least one to win the game, so chances are in turn 4, the Dracula player will try to get a counterattack. So those are just things that between the map, not having many areas, between the pieces being very generic and the victory conditions being what they are, you will tend to see these dynamics, I believe, presenting themselves fairly often. So for a game that you play a couple of times a year, that's perfectly fine. I don't think this is a game that you will explore a million times and will discover nuances every time. And again, it's not because of the lean rule set. To me, that's an advantage. I really enjoy light war games these days more than I used to. And you have war games with just an equally lean rulebook that yet have more problems to solve, and they draw you back and you want to try many times. But here the overall situation will be very similar, so I think it's a game that you'll take out a couple of times a year. A friend is coming over, and the novelty, I'm pretty sure that it'll be easy to convince somebody to play this game at least once or twice, just because the unusual topic. So the limited replay value, the fairly rigid script of the action are the only limits that I see in here, because other than that, you have a game that is definitely enjoyable and fun to play, makes for a fun solitaire puzzle, especially if you think of yourself as the Dracula player and you're trying to survive, you're trying to prepare that counterattack. So overall, I'm pleased and satisfied with Forest of the Impaled. Again, a little bit mixed feelings about the replay value in the long run, but for the short run, for the occasional play, this is definitely an original and enjoyable game.